The hum of the airport filled the early morning air at Chicago O'Hare, a gentle buzz of travelers pulling suitcases, sipping coffee, and waiting at gates. Ellie Harper, 26 and a little frazzled, clutched her boarding pass as she navigated the crowded terminal. Her dark blonde hair was tucked into a messy ponytail, and her backpack bounced against her shoulder with every step. She was flying to Seattle for a job interview, her first real shot at a graphic design position after years of freelance gigs. The ticket had cost most of her savings, and the weight of that choice pressed against her chest. Ellie boarded Flight 217, a red-eye bound for the West Coast. The plane smelled of recycled air and faint perfume, its cabin dimly lit as passengers settled in. She glanced at her boarding pass, seat 23B, and shuffled down the aisle, her eyes scanning the row numbers. The plane was half full, with plenty of empty seats, and she sighed in relief. Maybe she'd get some space to think, to calm her nerves before tomorrow's interview. She spotted row 23 and slid into the window seat, assuming it was hers. The middle seat was empty, and the aisle seat held a man in a crisp navy suit, his head bent over a laptop. Ellie tucked her backpack under the seat and leaned against the window, the cool glass soothing against her temple. The city lights blinked outside, a quiet promise of something new. She closed her eyes, letting the soft drone of the engines lull her into a moment of peace. James Colton, 51 and CEO of a Seattle-based renewable energy company, barely noticed the young woman who sat beside him. His focus was on the spreadsheet glowing on his screen, numbers and projections for a new wind farm project. He'd built his company from a small startup to a leader in green tech, but the grind never stopped. This flight was just another leg in a week of meetings, and he welcomed the solitude of the red eye. As the plane leveled off, James glanced at the woman in the window seat. She looked young, maybe in her 20s, with a tired slump to her shoulders. Her jeans were faded, her hoodie slightly worn, but there was a quiet determination in the way she clutched a small notebook, its pages filled with colorful sketches. He wondered, briefly, what her story was, but he pushed the thought aside. He wasn't here to make friends. He was here to work. The flight attendant's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing the beverage service. Ellie stirred, blinking as she reached for her boarding pass to check something. Her eyes widened. "Oh no," she muttered, her voice barely audible. She turned to James, her cheeks flushing. Sir, I think I'm in your seat. I'm supposed to be in 23B, the middle one. I'm so sorry." James looked at her, then at his own boarding pass, which he hadn't checked since boarding. Sure enough, he was in 23C, the aisle, and she'd taken 23A. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that came from years of diffusing tense boardroom moments. "No harm done," he said. "You seem comfortable there. Stay put." Her Ellie hesitated, her hands twisting the boarding pass. "Are you sure? I can move. I didn't mean to mess up." "It's fine," James said, his tone gentle but firm. "I like the aisle better anyway. Easier to stretch my legs." She nodded, still embarrassed. "Thank you. I wasn't paying attention. Happens to the best of us," he said, closing his laptop. He noticed the way her fingers lingered on the notebook, her nails painted a chipped sky blue. "You an artist?" Your Ellie's eyes lit up, then dimmed with caution. "Sort of. I do graphic design. Freelance mostly, but I'm hoping to get a job in Seattle." "Big move," he said, leaning back in his seat. "What's in Seattle?" "A company called Green Wave Designs. They do branding for eco-friendly businesses. I have an interview tomorrow." Her voice was soft, but there was a spark of hope in it. James's eyebrows lifted slightly. Greenwave was a client of his company, though he didn't mention it. "That's a good outfit. You must be talented if they're flying you out." She laughed, a nervous sound. "I hope so. I've been working toward this for a long time. It's kind of my last shot. He nodded, sensing the weight behind her words. You'll do fine. Just be yourself. Ellie smiled, a small, grateful curve of her lips. She opened her notebook, flipping through sketches of logos and posters, her fingers tracing the lines as if they held her dreams. James watched her for a moment, then turned back to his laptop, but the numbers didn't hold his attention anymore. An hour into the flight, the cabin lights dimmed further, and most passengers dozed or watched movies. Ellie's notebook lay open on her lap, but her eyes were heavy. She'd been up all night preparing for the interview, practicing answers, tweaking her portfolio. The gentle hum of the plane pulled her under, and soon her head tilted against the window, her breathing slow and steady. James noticed her sleeping and felt a pang of something. Empathy, maybe. He remembered his own early days, scraping by, chasing dreams that felt just out of reach. His company was thriving now, but the climb had been lonely, full of sacrifices. He wondered what sacrifices Ellie had made to get here, to this plane, to this moment. The flight attendant passed by, offering coffee. James waved her off quietly, not wanting to wake Ellie. Instead, he reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small notepad of his own. He wasn't sure why, but he jotted down a name and email address. Leela Chen, the creative director at Green Wave. He'd met her at a conference last year, and they'd stayed in touch. Maybe he could put in a word, just a nudge, nothing more. But as he looked at Ellie, her notebook slipping slightly from her lap, he hesitated. Would it be too much? He didn't know her, didn't owe her anything. Yet there was something about her quiet determination, the way she held on to her dreams, despite the odds. He tore the page from his notepad, folded it, and tucked it into the pocket of her backpack, careful not to disturb her. It felt like a small act, but it warmed him in a way he hadn't expected. Ellie woke as the plane began its descent into Seattle. The sky outside a soft gray streaked with dawn. She rubbed her eyes, embarrassed to realize she'd fallen asleep. The man beside her, James, she remembered, was reading a newspaper now, his laptop stowed. She glanced at her notebook, relieved it hadn't fallen, and tucked it into her backpack. Thanks again for letting me stay in the window seat, she said, her voice shy. I didn't mean to crash like that. James folded his newspaper, his eyes kind. You needed the rest. Big day ahead. Right? Yeah, she said, her stomach fluttering at the thought of the interview. I'm kind of nervous. You'll do great, he said. And there was a certainty in his voice that made her believe it, just a little. As they disembarked, Ellie shouldered her backpack and joined the stream of passengers heading toward the terminal. James walked a few steps behind, his suitcase rolling smoothly beside him. At the gate, he paused, turning to her. Good luck, Ellie. I mean it? She smiled, surprised he'd remembered her name. Thanks, James, right? He nodded, then tipped his head toward her backpack. Check your bag when you get a chance. Safe travels. Before she could ask what he meant, he was gone, blending into the crowd. Ellie stood there for a moment, puzzled, then headed to baggage claim. In a quiet corner of the airport, she unzipped her backpack to check her phone and found a folded piece of paper tucked into the front pocket. She opened it, her breath catching. Ellie, if you need a connection at Green Wave, reach out to Leela Chen. She's their creative director and a good person. Tell her James Colton sent you. Good luck. You've got this. James. Ellie stared at the note, her heart racing. James Colton. She'd heard the name before, CEO of Colton Energy, a big player in renewables. He wasn't just some businessman, he was someone who could open doors. And he'd given her this, a stranger, without asking for anything in return. Later that day, after checking into her budget hotel, Ellie sat on the bed, the note in her hand. she didn't email Lila Chen right away. Instead, she went to her interview, portfolio in hand, and gave it everything she had. She answered questions, showed her sketches, and spoke from the heart about why she loved design. When the interviewer asked if she knew anyone at Green Wave, she hesitated, then mentioned James's name. The interviewer's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't press. A week later, back in Chicago, Ellie got the call. She'd gotten the job. The interviewer mentioned that Lila Chen had vouched for her potential, based on a call from James Colton. Ellie sat on her couch, tears in her eyes, clutching the note she'd kept in her wallet. She didn't know how to thank him, or if she'd ever see him again, but his kindness had changed everything. James, back in Seattle, stood in his office overlooking Puget Sound. He'd gotten an email from Lila, thanking him for the tip about Ellie Harper. "She's a gem," Lila wrote. "Perfect fit for our team." James smiled, a quiet warmth spreading through him. He didn't need to meet Ellie again to know he'd done something good. Sometimes, he thought, the smallest acts, a note, a kind word, could ripple outward, making the world a little brighter. Ellie, unpacking her bags in her new Seattle apartment weeks later, taped the note to her sketchbook. It was a reminder that kindness could come from anywhere, even a stranger on a plane. As she looked out at the city, her new home, she felt ready, not just for the job, but for whatever came next.